Where's the gentleman with the time card? Oh, okay. I'm suffering from a very bad case of dry eye, so I can see only a certain distance, so you may have to sing and dance and so forth. Okay, all right. You can wave it when the time comes. I thank you for the invitation to speak about heaven and hell from a Catholic perspective. I admit I have not been to heaven or hell, but have read quite a number of books about them. Heaven and hell are fundamental to Roman Catholicism. Heaven and hell are very real. We have in the scriptures two quite notable passages which deal with heaven and hell in rather stark terms. One is the story of the rich man and Lazarus. The rich man, because he pays no attention to the poor man, goes to hell. And the poor man, who is open to God's blessings, goes to heaven. There's also the very dramatic and quite frightening parable about the sheep and the goats. At the end of time, depending on our relationship to the poor and the needy, we go to heaven or hell. And it's quite shocking in some ways to realize that God has tied our eternal salvation to our relationship to those who are poor and needy. In this brief time, I will make the following 7 points. Heaven and hell in the Catholic tradition are not places, but they are conditions beyond space and time. Where Christ is, there is heaven. And where there is an utter absence of Christ, there is hell. Point number 2. Heaven and hell begin now in the present life. These realities exist in relationship to each other, as good and evil exist always in a dynamic relationship. Point number 3. Heaven is not an extrinsic reward, but the result of moral conversion. Heaven is something, in a certain sense, that begins in baptism, when we are first united to Christ. Heaven is the result not of our doing or the result of good works, but of being and made something, and that something is in the image of God. For hell is not God's imposition upon us humans, but a matter of our fundamental choice to stand in opposition to God. Some of you may be familiar with the writings of C.S. Lewis, and he has a great deal to say throughout his books and works on heaven and hell. And in this point, he says that we do not go to hell because somebody takes us there or sends us there. We go to hell by our own steam. And elsewhere, Lewis says that the door of hell is locked from the inside. Very interesting language. Point number 5, hell is a place of isolation, introversion, hatred, a place in which the damned meditate on themselves as in a mirror. Heaven is a place of ultimate loving community, a community of all the saints with the angels, with all men and women. Heaven and hell are matters of community on the one hand and radical individualism on the other. Number 6, those who are damned became in earth the kind of people who would simply not fit into heaven. Their natural environment is hell. They flee from God and the community of the redeemed. Point number 7, heaven and hell are eternal. They last forever. But this has been a point of some controversy over the centuries in Catholic and Christian theology in general. There is a theory of universalism, and that means that heaven and hell last forever, and hell does not pass away. But universalists hold that those who are damned at the end of time are redeemed. Why? Because a good God is stronger than the power of evil. Many people hold a view of that might be called modified universalism, and that is the view that while hell exists for eternity, no one actually has ever gone there. And a notable, such as Thomas Aquinas, has made the point that while as Catholics we must believe in hell, we do not have to believe that anybody actually has ever gone there. And now a question, what is heaven like? What goes on in heaven? Most people, I think that heaven might be boring, might be dull, and that's the greatest fear regarding heaven. So I want to, there are many, many answers to that question. I want to give you 5, which I think summarize a good deal, but of course not everything. There will be in heaven resting in peace. That's what you find all over gravestones. These are probably the most widely used words regarding heaven. Eternal rest is a dynamic and engaging reality. It is the correlation with the human experiences of restlessness and anxiety. So resting in heaven in a dynamic way is one of the fundamental categorizations of heaven, and heaven is not boring. Secondly, there will be contemplation of divine beauty. The experience of what is called the beatific vision, the eternal contemplation of divine beauty, is central to Roman Catholic belief about heaven. The beatific vision means being constantly overwhelmed by the unfathomable beauty of God, and in turn being oneself transformed and deified as we grow forever into God's glory. Thirdly, there will be participation in the Trinity. However one defines Trinity, God, the triune God, that's a matter beyond the scope of this discussion. But one of the ancient names for the eternal relationship between Father, Son, and Spirit is perikoresis, a Greek word, which means to move around, to dance together. So the loving dance of the Trinity draws humankind into itself, a process already at work on earth, but one that will be complete in heaven. And it's already at work on earth insofar as there is a kind of dance that goes on in all of our movements. And when the dance is bad, well, watch MTV. And when the dance between people in all kinds of ways is good, then already there is a prefigurement of human community. Number 5, there will be communion with the saints. One of the mistakes that we Catholics and Christians in general perhaps have forgotten is the designation of all believers as saints, which of course those of you in the Latter-day Saints tradition hold. It's a perfectly good description of a person who is in Christ, and one that I constantly in my homilies encourage, much to people's surprise sometimes. So in heaven there will be family, friends, ancestors, and descendants, and they will grow in a love that was only anticipated partially on earth. Dwelling in the New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem, a prominent theme in scriptures, especially in the book of Revelation, will be the civic place in which God will dwell with the angels and saints and redeemed humankind. There will next be feasting in the kingdom. The feast in the ministry of Jesus had a strong eschatological character, a strong orientation on the world to come. It pointed to the eternal banquet of the kingdom. A prominent feature of the eschatological festival is the wedding feast of the Lamb, written about so beautifully in the book of Revelation, which consummates the covenant between God and humankind. Finally, there will be eternal enjoyment of God. This is something we don't tend to think about very much. We think of God as a rather severe figure by character. But the language of enjoying God is present in the scriptures and Christian thought. Enjoyment has an element of ecstasy to it. Christians pour themselves out to God, who pours himself out ecstatically into their lives. This mutual enjoyment dynamic will continue through eternity.